Peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. The Giza pyramids are one of the structures that have puzzled scientists and researchers for many centuries, especially the Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khufu, which is made of 2,300,000 stones. And these stones are extremely heavy, to the point where a single stone can weigh over 70 tons. At the same time, the pyramid is very tall, about 150 meters. I know most of us don't like numbers, but these numbers are truly staggering. How did those awesome ancient Egyptians manage to lift such heavy stones to such great heights? This task would be difficult for us in the current era, even with the existence of technology, equipment, and modern construction methods. So how did people from more than 4,000 years ago manage to build this massive structure when they had no technology, no equipment, nothing at all? All they had was a set of simple metal tools, some wood, and even stranger than all of that is how these people managed to fix the pyramid stones on top of each other without any cement or adhesive materials. The answer to this question is one of two things. Either these people were supernatural, God forbid, or they managed to reach a certain method of construction that doesn't require any modern technology or complex tools, but a very simple method, and precisely because of its simplicity, it never occurred to anyone. Welcome, I'm Abdullah, and in this episode of Midnight Curiosity, we'll answer the question, how did the ancient Egyptians build the pyramids? And before we start, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so our videos reach you first. The topic of how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids contains a large number of theories, some completely rejected, some accepted, and some quite amusing. Like, for example, one of the hypotheses that supports the idea that it was extraterrestrial creatures who built the pyramids. Yes, exactly like that. And even though the topic might seem laughable to some, there are actually a number of studies and research on the subject, and a large number of people firmly believe that aliens are the ones who built the pyramids. But of course, that's not logical at all, and is merely a hypothesis and nothing more. Another strange thing that's widespread in some people's minds is their belief that the ancient Egyptians were giants, with tall bodies, like the giants in Attack on Titan. And therefore, people as giant as that could easily lift a stone with their hands, carry it from one place to another, and build the pyramid with ease.
And it's not far-fetched that they were throwing stones to each other. Of course, this is also incorrect. The ancient Egyptians were neither giants nor anything of the sort, and their tallest were perfectly average. This is evidenced by the fact that the mummified bodies of the ancient Egyptians found in museums are not large-bodied at all. They're the same size as any other human. Also, if we look at the coffins found in tombs and museums, or even inside the pyramids themselves, we'll find that the coffin measurements are very normal and not large at all. So the ancient Egyptians, just without the belly. The traditional story about how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids, the one we were told as children, is that they transported the stones from southern Egypt and brought them all the way to the current pyramid site, transporting 2 million stones weighing tons across this enormous distance? Never mind that. And finally, they made an earthen ramp around the pyramid and then dragged the massive stone over it on cylindrical wooden rollers, pulling it with ropes using labor and workers, and so they built the pyramids. And despite the fact that this story passed us by without much thought, we need to pause and examine it. First, scientifically, for this method to work, the earthen ramp would have to be reinforced concrete, because an earthen ramp could never support the weight of 70 tons moving on it. It would simply collapse and crumble. Also, the wooden rollers wouldn't be able to bear these loads either, and you'd need at least steel wheels that are very strong, because we're talking about 70 tons. Therefore, the wooden roller and earthen ramp method and all that nonsense is completely illogical. And even if we assumed they executed this method, the size of the earthen ramp they're telling us about would have to be 10 times larger than the pyramid itself. And some thinkers say that building this giant earthen ramp and these enormous roads around the pyramid, and then removing them afterwards in a way that leaves no trace, is in itself an achievement that surpasses the achievement of the pyramid itself. And scientifically, it's impossible to remove such enormous ramps and roads without leaving any trace. And indeed, we have found no trace of them to this day. And this is incorrect. Some hypotheses that have appeared recently in an attempt to support the previous theory, some researchers speculated that the ancient Egyptians, while dragging the stones sitting on the wooden rollers, were pouring water on them, which would ease the rollers' movement and reduce the force needed to move these stones by roughly half. As for the point about how the ancient Egyptians transported 2 million massive stones from southern Egypt to their current location in Giza,
researchers favor the idea that the desert area where the pyramid is located was once a riverine area with multiple channels and branches of the Nile, and therefore they transported the stones via water. But of course, in the end, it's all attempts to justify the previous method, as we said. But with all of that, the method is still completely illogical and contains many questions with no answers. And the most important of these questions is, how did they lift these massive stones to these enormous heights without any cranes, aircraft, or modern equipment? But of course, no one has answered this. Did the ancient Egyptians, for example, have a device that allowed them to cancel gravity in a certain area so they could lift stones easily, and the pharaoh would say up, and the stone would fly to its place? Unfortunately, there's also no evidence for that. Let's move quickly to another point. How were the pyramid stones fixed to each other without the use of cement materials? And the answer they used to tell us, again those old guys leading us astray, was that they fixed the stones on top of each other through what is called air displacement, which simply means they would place two stones on top of each other and then somehow evacuate the air particles present between the two stones, causing the stones to become fixed on top of each other as if there were an adhesive material between them. But again, there's no evidence for this either, and it's all mere speculation, because the topic of air evacuation in itself requires advanced technologies. One of the most amazing things about the pyramids is how did they make the stone surfaces so precisely level? The pyramid stones are in the shape of cubes, parallelepipes, and regular rectangles, and these cubes are supposedly carved. Imagine that this carving was done with primitive equipment and simple tools, which in itself is a suicidal operation. Leveling the surface of 2 million stones is a task that requires unimaginable effort and extraordinary labor. So the idea of carving rocks is also completely illogical. And with that, practically all the methods and hypotheses we've heard up until now, none of them are correct. Goodbye. No, let's keep going. What would your reaction be if I told you that the stone cubes from which the pyramid is built were cast in place, just like ordinary concrete is cast, and that these rocks were neither carved nor anything of the sort? This was said by Swiss researcher von Daniken and Frenchman Joseph Davidovits, who claimed that the ancient Egyptians at the time knew a method to make a certain mixture that produces an artificial rock harder than the concrete we use today.
And this mixture was made of clay and some chemical materials that were heated. And when this mixture dries, it looks exactly like natural rock and can last for thousands of years. And imagine that by using this simple hypothesis, we'll solve all the problems we were encountering with all the previous hypotheses. We won't need to cut and carve rocks with high precision, we won't need to transport rocks over enormous distances, and we also won't need to lift rocks to that great height. And this is something... So how did these scientists reach this theory, and where did this matter start? The beginning was that a group of scientists were searching for a secret chamber inside the pyramid and exposed the entire pyramid to a set of rays. And suddenly, they noticed that the devices were giving them inconsistent and illogical results, even though the devices were working fine and had no malfunction. The only explanation for what happened was that the pyramid stones contained a very large amount of water inside them. And scientifically, this amount of water is impossible to exist in natural rocks. And this is what made them lean toward the idea that these rocks were manufactured or constructed. After that, Joseph conducted a practical experiment in which he tried to reach a mixture similar to this one. And the experiment succeeded, and he obtained positive results, and was indeed able to manufacture stones of these sizes and also adhered to each other. And currently, the researchers are trying to determine the composition of the mixture the ancient Egyptians used. And they say that the secret of this mixture is one of the many secrets that the ancient Egyptians knew, just as they knew astronomy, chemistry, and mummification. So in short, the stones of the pyramids were essentially a material similar to liquid cement concrete, poured into empty rectangular molds. And when they dry, they become cohesive and well-formed stones. And this is the method by which this great edifice was built. And it's not far-fetched that they also used it in other buildings, like temples and massive obelisks. So they weren't lifting stones or moving them, they were actually casting them in place inside molds. And of course, we're not saying that this casting hypothesis is the definitive method the ancient Egyptians used to build the pyramids, but we're saying that this is, to a great extent, the most logical and accepted hypothesis. And another theory may emerge one day that clarifies the matter even further.
And finally, no one can deny that the ancient Egyptians reached a level of knowledge in certain fields that we have not been able to reach to this day, despite the advancement in modern technology that we possess. And with that, we've answered today's question. How did the ancient Egyptians build the pyramids? And as usual, if there's a question that's puzzling you in the middle of the night while you're lying in bed and can't sleep, write it to us in the comments so we can answer it. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and for those watching us for the first time, subscribe and turn on the bell so our videos reach you first. And I'll see you in the next episode.
Free audio post-production by Alphonic.com.
So they weren't lifting stones or moving them. They were actually casting them in place inside molds. And of course, we're not saying that this casting hypothesis is the definitive method the ancient Egyptians used to build the pyramids, but we're saying that this is, to a great extent, the most logical and accepted hypothesis. And another theory may emerge one day that clarifies the matter even further. And finally, no one can deny that the ancient Egyptians reached a level of knowledge in certain fields that we have not been able to reach to this day, despite the advancement in modern technology that we possess. And with that, we've answered today's question. How did the ancient Egyptians build the pyramids? And as usual, if there's a question that's puzzling you in the middle of the night while you're lying in bed and can't sleep, write it to us in the comments so we can answer it. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and for those watching us for the first time, subscribe and turn on the bell so our videos reach you first. And I'll see you in the next episode.
Free audio post-production by Alphonic.com.